Hey everyone, can you hear me okay? Thumbs up? All right, excellent. So, I'd just like to thank Sumo for having me here today. You've probably heard of USA Today, but what's this USA Today network thing? These are some of our brands. It's not just USA Today, but we have a network of over 100 other newspapers around the country. You may recognize a brand here from your local paper. They're all on a shared platform and infrastructure. From our authoring and CMS to presentation and content distribution networks. But we're not just newspapers. We also produce VR content, in-depth interactive reporting. We have a drone fleet. On top of all that, we pulled down 3 Pulitzers this year, which I'm real proud of to be part of that. We're a next generation media company. 112-year-old next generation media company. So, who am I? Talking up here, Eric Rogme. I'm a senior manager on the platform engineering team. This is what I looked like when we were migrating to Sumo. I live on an island near Seattle. This is a photo of me in a kayak I built. Like a lot of engineers, I like to build things. But do notice the life jacket and the antenna sticking out of the pocket. That's a marine grade radio that'll float. Safety and support systems are always important. And Sumo provides a lot of that for us. It's a huge part of our ecosystem. So what are we going to talk about today? Pretty much going to talk about migrations. We do a lot of them. We do a few a year, it feels like. But part of that's just keeping up with the latest tools and taking advantage of speed to market and trying to transform our organization digitally. So one's up on the screen here. So in Q1, we tackled our logging platform migration. We're using Splunk Cloud, and we migrated to Sumo Logic. We did it inside a quarter, probably actually in about 2 months after we got all our ducks in a row and all our planning together. We're also, at the same time, we're doing a migration of significant workloads from AWS to Google Cloud. So, note AWS is a sponsor here. We're still a huge AWS user, but we are true multi-cloud. We have about 40% AWS right now on our platform, 60% in Google. And then the other big piece is VM workloads. We used to be a big VM shop. We use a cloud management platform called Scalar. It's actually one of the reasons we were able to be multi-cloud so easily. But starting actually with the 2016 elections, we're like, well, we got to start using containers so we can deploy quicker. And we chose Kubernetes. Anybody who's looked into Kubernetes may have looked at Kelsey Hightower's Kubernetes the hard way. We pretty much did that using Chef as our configuration management for that, and Scalar for some orchestration to get all the HA parts together. But yeah, so that was a couple years ago, and Kubernetes is essentially like a mini cloud, and it's hard to manage, and it's a very fast-moving project. And I have a team of 8 engineers, and we support a lot of things. And so we were like, well, let's use managed Kubernetes in Google, and so that was also part of our migration there. So all these things are happening at the same time. Also, we're onboarding Local IQ. It's a B2B part of our business, acquisition, and so trying to get them to come in, and they're actually existing Sumo customer. Anyhow, so what did we do? First step, we found our key stakeholder, and then we put them to work. For us, this was our security engineering team. We involved them early in the vetting process with Sumo Logic, and then continue to work with them every step of the way. It helps a lot to have a champion outside of your immediate organization to help advocate and rally those folks that you may not have direct influence over. For us, this was enterprise IT folks. We're on the product side, we manage the public cloud at USA Today Network, but we still have data centers, and they have log management needs. And think of domain controllers and old systems in the data center. The added benefit of a highly engaged stakeholder is they may help foot the bill. So keep that in mind. So step one, define your taxonomy. This is probably the single biggest takeaway I had from this whole migration. You really just take the time to understand your data and define a taxonomy that works for your organization. Having it codified and agreed upon will make the migration easier, both before, during, and after. Sometimes you may need to go flog somebody because they've got a bad source category and they're filling up your general index. It happens. Happens quite a bit, actually. And put it somewhere where folks can see it. GitHub works pretty good, and they can contribute and comment and submit a pull request if they want, think it should change and be a place of discussion. This is what we came up with: environment, data center, product, application. Pretty straightforward. I mean, it doesn't have to be super complicated. Well, this eye chart. This was a representation of what we put together in our GitHub README. So it's not complicated. We're not biologists. There were really only two areas where of our taxonomy where we locked it down. So we locked down PCI and enterprise for obvious reasons, right? So we blacklisted that for our general users, and then for folks who need access back into that, their roles and groups we whitelisted. So blacklist and then allow. And this is all mapped to 80 groups through our SAML single sign-on provider, which is Okta. It worked really slick, and it has allowed us to grow our user base very quickly with very low level of management around users and roles. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Keep it clean. So this is not a super pretty, elegant query, but you only have to write it once. There's no way to just say, give me the stuff in the general index today. So ask for everything and then exclude all the things you have partitioned. And this is an example of the things that are not matching our taxonomy, which we need to go track down and talk to those teams. So where do you get these things? They're right there in your UI. Manage data, settings, partitions, and you just use your routing expression. Just cut and paste, and then anytime you create a new partition, go update your query and you're good. So planning, right? Engage your key stakeholders, get everybody together, figure out your taxonomy, and then time to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty and get to work. For us, we're cloud-centric, so everything's automated, right? Automate, rinse, and repeat. We use Chef for our VM-based workloads and Kubernetes to orchestrate and schedule our container workloads. Sumo Logic has 2 excellent resources in GitHub for both of these. They have an excellent cookbook. So if you're a Chef shop, check it out. I suspect they probably have some things similar for Ansible and all the other configuration management platforms. And the FluentD Kubernetes Sumo Logic plugin, it's a daemon set, runs in your Kubernetes cluster. It just works. and that's a huge deal for us. So these, apologies for these code slides. This code slide is a bunch of Ruby. You might not be able to read it, but you can tell it's not that many lines of code. So we used before we had a whole bunch of different cookbooks that you'd have to update and add a source category here and for our previous vendor, and then update some pins and all this. And when we moved, we're moving to Sumo Logic, we really wanted to get rid of that pain, and we changed it to totally be attribute based. Folks who just include a few attributes in their cookbook that's included in our season our base cookbook, and just get new log sources that way. And we're programmatically enforcing this through just through how we coded it. So, programmatically enforce your taxonomy with sane defaults, allow overrides. It's worked out really well. So, FluentD collector, don't be afraid to make it your own. We use it pretty much whole hog. We changed 3 environment variables in our fork to allow it to match our taxonomy, because out of the box it comes up as Kubernetes / and we're like, well, we want our production clusters to be in production, dev clusters to be dev, and we want to understand our regions, because these are services that we want to look at regionally and in the same way we would our VM workloads. We also created an additional config map for setting some of these things at a cluster level. It's pretty straightforward. So what's this end up looking like, the Kubernetes plugin? This is pretty great, right? You get a lot of, so you got your log up there. Nginx log looks real familiar, but you get all of this rich metadata around it. Pod labels and namespace labels. So we run multi-tenant GK clusters. It's and so we have namespaces broken out by teams and stuff. And then down at the bottom you can see kind of our taxonomy being enforced, production, GCP, USC 4, etc. Here's another one. This is a slightly different format. There's a really cool feature called JSON Merge. So now you see all these other fields. So these came out of the container logs that were logging JSON format. Like a lot of Go applications will log in JSON, and you can have other things log JSON as well. And then the JSON Merge just merges it all up to the top level, so it's really easy for you to search it. The downside is it's very verbose, right? I don't think we need timestamp in here 3 times, but it's there, right? And that's taking up, the size of these logs, right? They are eating some of our license, so it's something to be aware of. And as an example of who's eating your license, so this is a really simple query, but really powerful. Like for this cluster, give me that team label that came out of the namespace, and there it is. Like, yep, core product developers, eating most of our log volume. So that's VMs, that's Kubernetes. What do we do for everything else? Hosted collectors. It is the Swiss Army knife of Sumo Logic. We use these for our Fastly integration, which is our content distribution network. For our on-premise traffic, we came through syslog MG aggregators that we already had in place, which is really nice, because if we hadn't had those, it probably would have been a much more difficult migration. And then we just route them to the proper source categories, so we have control over that. And then, the other great integrations and applications that Sumo Logic's put together, like GitHub, various cloud integrations. Go shopping in the app list. There's probably some stuff you have that is in there and you don't even know about it. Like, this new stuff comes out all the time. So the cutover. So we got everything set up. Oh, it's time to cut over. It was a total non-event. So for Chef, this is what the cutover looked like. We changed some default attributes, set one to false, one to true, and daemonized Chef took care of the rest. So for VMs, it was that easy. Kubernetes wasn't an issue because we didn't actually have that great a support for Kubernetes in our previous vendor. So how'd it go, right? Adoption rate. So when I put these slides together, we had 554 users. Just to give you an idea, that's more users than we have in our GitHub org, which I think is a great sign, because that means it's not just developers, right? We have business, product folks, security, the identity management folks, right, are using it. And we had 150 active users in the past week when I put these slides together. And that was a big deal for us, because before, when it was really just log aggregation, or nobody's, something broke, I got to go look at the logs. That was kind of the use case we had before. Now folks are really extracting value and data from their logs. And 150 folks is a pretty good number for us for having 554 active users. Previously I'd logged into our old solution, and there were times when it's like, 10 folks logged in this week, and half of those were my team, and the other half was security, and maybe one person was a developer. 546 dashboards. So we've been a Sumo customer since pretty much Q1. That's a pretty good number for 554 users, and 149 live dashboards. Folks are really using this data in real time to extract business value. So, raging success. Migration went off easily. It's just a non-event. Got good adoption. So now we got to monitor our log volume. There was a lot of moving parts during our migration, right? We're going from one cloud to another. We were bringing in acquisitions. We were changing from VM workloads to Kubernetes, and that's a lot of variables. So we ended up, some back of the napkin type calculations, and here's what we're going to license, right? So we ended up putting together some dashboards to manage this. We started with the pre-made ones that Sumo has. They're pretty good, but we needed something that was more team specific. And so, like anything, you take what you're given and then you make it your own. You can see here that, so the big line at the end there, that's FASTA, that's our CDN. That has a huge impact on our log volumes. And like all of our stuff, it's programmatically managed. So, somebody can push a GitHub PR request with some VCL, and it goes through CI/CD, and they end up with some new logs. And also, looking at like who's the big contributors. So this has really helped. This was it was performant right when we got started, but as we grew and as the log data grew and we had a longer tail and a lot more source categories, that's one of the ways that we're different from maybe some Sumo customers, is because we're programmatically creating these based on like container workloads and things like that. We have a lot of source categories, and so some of the out-of-the-box things were slow. So we ended up went through a few iterations of tuning. to get this performant, and we had a few different scheduled views, and now instead of minutes, it's seconds. So key takeaways. First, find your key stakeholder and let them help you drive the migration. Let them get excited about their use cases and the features they need. It's good to have a buddy when you're doing one of these things. Second, don't dive right in. It will feel like you're spinning your wheels. It's like, okay, well, we're ready to go. We got our license, and here's our account, and got it hooked up. But take the time to plan your taxonomy. This will pay off exponentially down the road. And publish the standard so everybody knows what it is. Automate with same defaults. Make it easy for people to use this, right? They can change it later, but if they don't have to do anything and their logs show up and they can search for their team, they can start getting these dashboards together super quick and start driving business value for themselves. Be ready to monitor your general partition and your log volumes. And lastly, take advantage of the trainings. As part of getting onboarded, training was included in our package, and we had some excellent trainings. In fact, I had people come up to me afterwards. We had training with Olaf, and he's awesome. And it's like, folks are like, that's the best training I've ever had from a vendor, like hands down. Most useful, best training. And and some of those folks went and then gave a training to their team. Like it was viral and trained how they wanted to organize their dashboards and their data and everything. It's really powerful. And also, do the certifications. They're a great way to learn. And take advantage of your TAMs. They are super knowledgeable. A few tips. So for Kubernetes, don't log your health checks. This is like the biggest thing, like, oh, new team came onto a cluster. They're blowing up their logs. It's status, because Kubernetes itself is running health checks to see, do I need to kill this pod? Is it still, it's like, oh yeah, status, great. So don't do that. There's absolutely no value there. Use log format JSON Merge for your JSON container logs. It'll save you a few periods and nested parses. And the other thing is your logs will be bigger when you move to containers because there's just more metadata around them. It's useful, but plan accordingly, right? Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Move on to some Q&A. Real quick, I wanted to ask, was there anybody's question of why we did a migration? Yeah? Okay. So I'll kick it off with that, and then go on to another question. So why do we migrate from Splunk Cloud to Sumo Logic? So Sumo Logic is a true SaaS. Splunk Cloud is Splunk running your Splunk for you. Has a lot of the same things you would if you had an operations team running it for you in a data center, right? Around support turnaround times, things like that. Also ease of integrations. So, and then also stakeholder and internal customer engagement. But yeah, like the support turnaround times, it's Sumo is self-service. Like there's no, like if I need to plug something else in, I just do it. I don't have to open a ticket, request a maintenance window, right? It can get to be like trying to get your cable hooked up or an appliance delivered. I mean, you laugh, but you laugh because it's true. But yeah, and the other thing is stakeholder and internal customer engagement. All of my Sumo users, all 500 plus of those users, can open tickets and ask questions, right? They just do it. That's super powerful. Like, if you have a support entitlement with 3 or 4 engineers who are on the super special team and who manage the vendor, all those questions coming through that bottleneck or to get this thing set up or that thing set up, that slows down innovation and also uses up what is some pretty valuable engineers who could be building things, right, instead of opening tickets. So that was a huge, huge part of why we decided to migrate. And also just being a true SaaS is a big deal for us, because the speed of market is amazing. Yeah. Any other questions?
So just raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll bring the mic to you. Any questions? Okay.
In your talk, you mentioned that you guys do a lot of migration. So what's the next big technology migration that you think is going to provide a lot of value for USA Today?
That's a great question. I think hopefully it won't be migrating from one solution to another. I think probably for us, service mesh is going to be huge. As you saw, we're migrating a lot of our workloads to Kubernetes in GKE, and you can use service discovery within the cluster. You can use that if you're a small team, but when you have 30 different development teams developing microservices that they all consume each other and have doing releases and new things all the time, we're going to need that service mesh in place. Probably be Istio in place to really to wire it all up. Because we have some use cases where we'll have somebody going out and coming in through an API gateway when the services are in the same cluster. That's a lot of hops for when it should just be call this service, right? Have this route, and also the additional layer of operational intelligence we'll gain from like distributed tracing, things like that, is going to be huge for us.
Okay. So Eric, we have a question here.
All right.
Hey, Eric, great presentation. So you mentioned that you're using AWS and GCP.
Yep.
AWS, rendered simple, everybody gets why you're using them. Why GCP? Did you guys look at Azure? Did you compare and contrast Azure to GCP before you settled on GCP?
It's a great question. A few things. So there's cost was a consideration for us. Sustained use discounts were a big deal. You get it out of the gate, and then there's committed use discounts on top of that. It's all committed use discounts are a lot like how our eyes function now, where it's kind of account wide. But the speed of the network was a big deal for us, and then also the speed of launch time. On our VM workloads, we use disposable infrastructure, so if you need to redeploy, you kill your servers and start them again. So if that is seconds instead of minutes, that's a really big deal for us. And there are some other things like GKE, right? It's Google. I've met with those product folks who run that program and the security folks that secure it, and they are the same folks who are committing to the Kubernetes, open source code base. So that was a big deal. We do have in the larger Gannett organization, we do have some Azure, but it's not necessarily part of our product platform that I manage.
Actually, I do have a follow-up question. So as someone who's using both Azure and GCP, How do you compare the two services? I mean,
You mean
sorry,
AWS?
AWS and GCP. I mean, AWS is obviously, it's got, hundreds of services, security services, CloudWatch, you name it, right? How is GCP along the same lines?
They've come a long way. So you mentioned CloudWatch. They have Stackdriver, and that team is putting out features at a rapid rate. And then it's some of it's you pick what you need. Our data intelligence team, they're huge Redshift users, right? That's not going to change. But like we're starting to use a lot more cloud services on Google, like PubSub and things like that, where we had been using RabbitMQ on VMs, right? So we're starting to shift to more cloud services. We tried to stay cloud agnostic for a long time, and that in fact did help us in our migration because we have Scalar as an abstraction layer for that. And so we're like, oh yeah, so instead of launching in that region, launch in this region. But yeah, I think there's strengths at both vendors.
Any other questions?
Oh, there's one.
You mentioned that the app catalog was useful for you. What are the other apps that you want to have, but they're not there yet?
That's a great question. I mean, for me, continue to roll out the various cloud integrations for both AWS and for Google. It's both clouds have been putting out product at kind of a breakneck pace, so it can be difficult to keep up. But like I said, we're starting to use PubSub quite a bit, and then Cloud Data Store, Spanner, and then I mean it's a lot of it though is like us being able to build our own stuff out, and like all the great stuff we've seen with templated dashboards. We're going to go back and implement that for kind of some base use cases for our own flavor.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, with that, thank you so much, Eric,
Yeah, thank you.
for coming here.